So, the two topics that I have really discovered that is a major timeline or guide frame that has been spanning across all of these authors and the four laws that came through was the first one was white race ignorance. What is not understood from the white race is usually ignored. The whites did not understand the black race. They face prejudice. They face so much segregation, and there was no understanding. The white race also did not understand the Native Americans. In fact, they just suppressed them as much as they could. They put them in a little box, which is one of the biggest things that I have discovered while reading this about the Native Americans. They were put in a box, they were put on a small parcel of land, and they were pretty much ignored by the government. They were given strict regulations, and they faced so many stereotypes. The immigrants that came from the Philippines, such as Carlos Busan, he faced the prejudice of the white Americans because nobody decided to try and understand their culture. Nobody tried to understand their race. Nobody tried to understand who they were as a people, as a culture, in fact. Same for Paredes, Americo Paredes. He was of Mexican heritage, and he was just ignored the entire time because of the fact that he was Mexican, and so he found himself struggling to maintain his roots to his Mexican heritage, such as shown in his book, George Washington Gomez. He was tried to get, they wanted him to adapt. These white people, the white race, wanted all these minorities to adapt, to not understand. They didn't want to understand the culture. They wanted the minorities to adapt to their own culture. This is something that is hugely prevalent in all of these books, and Moja as well, where they didn't understand her culture. There's nobody that really tried to understand her culture. Nobody that tried to understand who she was and why she was wearing a scarf and why she was the color that she was. Nobody tried to understand that. Some of the teachers attempted, but not many of her classmates attempted to try and figure out who she was as a person. And the other one is cultural adaptation. Like I said before, the white race wanted the minorities to adapt to their culture. This is extremely relevant in Americo Paredes and George Washington Gomez, where George Washington is at the crossroads of whether or not to accept who he is as a Mexican or completely disregard his Mexican heritage and just adapt to the white race, the white culture. Moja experienced this as well, and so did Vinay Dolores. He understood the pressures that the white people put on them. James Baldwin understood this as well, and he was saying, instead of ignoring this, he wanted them to forgive them, because there's been the white race. There's a lot of great things about the white race, but there's a lot of downfalls of the white race itself. There has been many prejudices against the minority group from the white race that has not allowed them to truly fulfill their own destiny, in the sense that there could be way more greater advantages, technological advances, so many more things that could be done if they had the voice, if they were allowed the voice to be heard. And so it saddened me to hear that, as I'm reading this, that there has been so much prejudice, so much pushback against all these races whenever you see this, and you see how many of them just understand and are being understanding and are trying to, instead of hate the Caucasian, the Americans, the white Americans, instead they try to get them to understand instead of allowing them to just plead ignorance. But I loved what I learned. I will absolutely remember this for as long as I can remember, because this will be something that I will be teaching in my own classroom. about Corrigan, about how you need to look beyond a text. You need to look beyond the words. You need to not only look at the background, but you also need to understand who they are. That all the political and socioeconomical powers that go into making the laws into the authors themselves, because they face so many things. They have, whenever you're moving from slavery to freedom from slavery, you have to stand socioeconomical differences, as the socioeconomicals was the money. It was just the money. It was like, is it worth? Because slaves are worth their price because they made labor so cheap, or made labor free. You buy the slave, but then at the same time you'd have to feed the slave, pay for the slave. And then, but as you go through it, as they were freed, there were so many different ideas that came through, like the Jim Crow laws that allow for segregation. This is to put the minorities back in the box. This is a sense of freedom, but while it's not freedom. And then you have the immigrations, where they all immigrated to America to be able to become free from their own country. But at the same time, they also faced issues, political issues, socioeconomical issues, such as they were barely able to feed their own families due to how much the labor costs were, their conditions they lived in. And then, so when you learn about these different authors and their backgrounds and where they come from, this is something to be seriously considered, because of the fact that you don't know what they've gone through. And whenever you read their text, this is just history in the making, because they're allowing the white Americans, America in general, to understand how they can fix, how they can adapt, and how they can reform themselves to allow for a better community, to allow a better brotherhood, as Josiah Strong has stated. Christianity is just the basis foundations of what his teachings are. There's a lot, again, like I've said, there's many people who think of him as a white supremacist, but some of his ideas are founded on good foundation, not just Christianity, but on the Industrial Revolution. So as you go back and you read some of these people, I want you to look deeper into the text. Don't just look at the basis of it. Look at the form. Look at the way it's read. Look at your text. Look at your context. Just read it and understand it and try to decipher the author's emotions, their feelings, what is being conveyed within the book itself. And so, and I have all we're excited that you can find it all, and what I've learned, what I've understood, and what I've adapted to. So I thank you so much for listening to this, and I'm sorry that there's 3 parts to this. There's just a lot of information that can only fit into so much time frame, and so thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.